What's up, guys? Today we are going to build and assemble an Adirondack chair. I first start out by grabbing some 2x6s and some 1x4s and start breaking them down into all the cuts that I am going to need for this build. I will put a link in the description with all the cuts and templates that'll make it pretty easy for you to follow along this build. I had some leftover 2x6s, so I decided to make some spacers. I set this table saw to a 1/2 inch and 3/4 inch depth for these spacers, and they will ultimately make this build a whole lot easier to assemble. These spacers can be made out of pretty much any kind of wood that you have left over, so don't worry about trying to use a 2x6 or whatever I'm using for this video. Once you are finished with all of your cuts, you are going to want to trace out the arms, legs, and arm braces for this chair. I went ahead and made some templates out of plywood so that all of my cuts will be pretty much the same going through this build. And again, I will be putting a link in the description with the measurements of my templates so that you can use them as well. Now you're going to want to trace out your backrest. I went ahead with a simple design that I will put in the description, but you are more than welcome to be as creative as possible with this backrest design. And don't worry about all the sharp remarks on the wood, as they will be sanded off later. And now you are going to want to grab your jigsaw and start cutting out all of the pieces that you just finished tracing earlier. The jigsaw that I use is Ridgid's 18-volt Octane jigsaw, but pretty much any jigsaw brand should work for this build. And now you're going to want to start sanding down all the pieces that you just finished cutting out. Be sure to hit the entire surface of every board so that you will have a whole lot less to sand at the end. Now let's take these to the table so that we can finish sanding the rest of the pieces. And now you're going to grab your router and hit all of the edges on the armrests and the armrest supports. If you do not have a router, a sander should do the trick. Just hit the edges on the top and the bottom of the armrest along with the armrest supports so that it'll eliminate all the chances of it splintering or any of the sharp edges poking anybody. The router bit that I use is the Diablo 1/4 inch rounder bit. It just gives the chair a nice smooth look at the end. And now that we have finished with all the prep work, we are now ready to start assembling this chair. So first, you're going to want to clamp down your front board to a vise or any sort of clamp, and then drill 2 pilot holes on each side of the board into the back legs. The bits that I use are the Milwaukee countersink bits, which leave the screw heads just flush with the wood and just gives it a nicer look in the end. Now you're going to want to go grab your front legs and measure 11.5 inches from the bottom and draw a line with your speed square. This line should line up with the bottom of the front board. Be sure to get a clamp and clamp these down pretty tight so that there is no wiggle room while you are drilling the guide holes for the bolts. And now you're going to grab your drill and use a 5/16 drill bit to drill the pilot holes for the bolts you will install. And be sure to put in the first 2.5-inch bolt prior to putting in the second one so that there is zero movement as you are drilling the second pilot hole. And here's a closer look at about where I put each of these pilot holes. It doesn't really matter exactly where you place them as long as they are somewhat apart and at two different angles. Go ahead and tighten up all 4 bolts on the inside so that we can get ready to install the seat boards of this chair. For the seat portion of this build, you're going to want to use the 24-inch cuts of the 1x4s. Go ahead and grab your 1/2-inch spacers that we cut earlier and place them in between each board as you lay them out. And now we're going to grab our drill with the countersink bit and drill 2 holes on each side of every board. Be sure to only drill in one board at a time and then pull the next board towards you as you're drilling it in. That will make sure that each board is evenly spaced out with the spacers that you're using. And now I'm going to grab my arm brace and clamp it down flush with the top of the front leg. Be sure to use a speed square to make sure that the arm brace is level on each side. And now you're going to want to grab your drill and place one 2.5-inch screw into the back of the arm brace. Go ahead and do the same thing as you did on the other side, and then we'll be about ready to install the armrests. Now let's get ready to put on these armrests. Go ahead and grab some scrap wood and cut it right at 24 inches so that it'll help support the armrest install. The armrest should be about 1 inch past the front of the legs. And now I'm going to grab my drill and place one hole and screw on each side of each brace. I only put one screw in right now so that I can adjust these armrests as we are putting in the backrest. After the backrest is installed, I will put in the final 2 screws on each armrest. Now let's put together this backrest. I am going to measure the center of this lower back brace right at 12 inches. This will center the first board, and you're going to use the 3/4 inch spacers to evenly space out the rest of the boards going along each side. And now I'm going to grab my drills and drill some pilot holes on each board. You're going to want to put 2 pilot holes on each board that go into the lower back brace. Now before we install the backrest, I am going to grab the upper back brace and measure 22.5 inches from the front of the armrest all the way to the top line of the back brace. And now I'm going to get some clamps and clamp down the back brace so that there is zero movement as I am drilling the pilot holes. And again, I am going to use the 5/16 inch drill bit as I did on the front legs. Be sure to double check your measurements to make sure that it is still at 22.5 inches. And now I'm going to grab the 2.5 inch bolts and hammer them slightly under the bottom level of the armrest. This will allow me to line up the holes with the back brace and hammer them in a lot easier. And now we are ready to install the backrest. Go ahead and get some clamps and clamp down each side of the backrest. Be sure to push it all the way forward towards the back end of the seat. You're going to place 2 screws on each side of the lower back support into the bottom legs. And now I'm going to drill 2 holes on each board of the backrest. Be sure your drill is horizontal with the upper backrest so that the pilot hole goes straight into that board. And make sure you are using a countersink bit so that your screw heads sit flush with the wood. And finally, I'm going to get my sander with 120 grit sandpaper or higher and do some final touches on this chair. Thank y'all again for watching the video, and if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe and like this video. It will be greatly appreciated. I will see y'all next time. See ya!